noticed that scrapbooking is kind of two hobbies in one. The first hobby is collecting all the beautiful supplies. The second is actually using them. Hey creative friends, it's Gwen. Collecting scrapbook supplies is fun and easy. Using them? That's a little harder to do. Today, I'm creating a scrapbook layout with a focus on using up my stash. I'm going all in on layers. There's tags, frames, die cuts, and more, including supplies very kindly sent to me by Bramble Fox. My big challenge today will be using as many supplies that I can in a way that doesn't look cluttered. Let's see how this goes. Today I'm working with Pink Fresh Studios Flower Market Collection, and I cannot believe just how well they coordinate with the supplies that Bramble Fox sent me. They make the most beautiful accessories for scrapbooks, planners, project life, and cards. They have a huge selection of acrylic pieces, stencils, little cut apart sheets, so many supplies, and they ship internationally. I'll leave all the details in the description box below. A huge thank you to the team for sending me such beautiful supplies to create with. So I mentioned earlier that my challenge is going to be using up as many supplies as I can for this page, but I want to do it in a way that's not going to make it feel really cluttered. I still want to have a fairly clean feel and look to the page. It's going to be really important to lock in bigger items first. So I do want to use the pocket that you see there and this tag. When Pink Fresh first started to include these items in their collections, I was finding that I was getting to the end of my supplies and I hadn't used these pieces up. And that was because I never got them onto the page early enough. I've since learnt that if I can get them into a position really early in the design process, they're lovely to use. I use them all the time now. I find they work best when they're the base for an embellishment cluster, and that is exactly what they're going to be for this page. Normally, I would position the tag inside the pocket, but for this layout, I wanted that extra paper layer and I wanted to create a little bit of interest above the photo there. I am going to treat them as two separate elements, so I do need some pretty details to cover up the top of that pocket there. I've gone with a scrap piece of pattern paper and then I just used my corner punch to round the corners. The second element there is a die cut. Now, because these layers are all quite large, the way to get them to work is to nestle them in really close together. See how I moved the tag down closer towards the top of the photo? You really have to be okay with covering things up, and it is so worth it because when you do, you get this lovely layered effect. I've said it before and I will keep saying it, you cannot have a lovely layered layout without covering a few things up. This next layer is actually going to be flat because it is going to be the stencil. I am mapping out the page right now. I was oh so close to adding the mixed media until I realized that I know I want to add a cluster on the right hand side here. What does that have to do with the mixed media at the bottom of the page? I'm glad you asked. At this point, I have no idea how big that cluster is going to be. I don't know if the florals are going to spread more across the page and to the right, or if they're going to go above the tag there. Oh yes, I wanted to show you that too. There were florals in this collection that were almost identical to the paper snips ones that were provided by Bramble Fox. I didn't end up using them on this layout, but I am for sure going to keep them with this collection. They match it so well. Now I did have a little bit of trouble building out this cluster actually, and I have on purpose left a lot of the footage in this video. I've been getting a lot of questions about how to create layered clusters of late, and I have done a video series. The first 2 videos of that are up on the channel already. I'll be sure to leave those linked below, but the big takeaway that I'd love you to get from this is that it doesn't always come together perfectly easy for me. Being creative is not something that you can just turn off and on. I'm sure we've all had moments where our mojo just hasn't quite been right. There's just so many things that can affect it. in this case, I actually feel like it was overwhelm. It was supply overwhelm. I had so many florals to choose from and I just wasn't sure where to start. Generally, I would do a sweep through the supplies and exclude anything that I thought wouldn't work. I didn't do that this day and I don't know why. What I did do to help though was focus on what I did know. I knew I wanted to use the Perfect Moments title. That is an acrylic piece from Bramble Fox. It's beautiful. I knew I wanted it positioned on the right of my photo there and more towards the top of the pocket. So I put that in place, I've done a reset and I am actually going to build the cluster out from there. I did get to thinking here too, the florals in this collection are all very different. I do want to use up quite a lot of them if I can, but remember I don't want it to be busy, and I think by nature having different types of flowers was going to make it look busier than it was. So I did at this point recognize that I would have to find repeating flowers. It would help it feel more consistent and simpler. While I have a think on that, I will move to another section of the layout, and I wanted to cover up the floral element that's at the bottom of the tag there. I thought this little puffy sticker was going to work very well because it is quite simple. I do that quite a lot actually. If I am struggling with a particular area on the layout, I will move to another area just to give myself a little break. It's also a lot about trial and error, auditioning things and just seeing how they look. I layer elements in, I take some away, I switch things out, and I just keep going until I'm happy with how it all looks. Remember, what you see here on YouTube is also an edited video. This layout took me about an hour and a half, and you're only going to see 12 minutes of that. That's an awful lot of shuffling and moving things around that you just won't get to see. Things are getting serious. I am finally gluing things down, and can you see how simple that floral cluster ended up? I found two very simple floral elements and I am going to go with those. You will see as the video goes on that I do build that out slightly. I find it's always best to start simple because you can build up from there. Okay, next is frames. I do want to get a couple of them onto the layout. This is a little bit tricky because remember, I still have my mixed media to do. I actually end up adding 5, and the reason that I can get so many on the page is that I'm going to layer them in with what's here already. I always end up with so many of these frames left over in a collection, so I'm really happy to get so many on this page. You may have noticed that the photo and embellishment area was looking a little bit blocky. I love how the frames have added interest to that outside edge. The other thing that helped this work super well was the fact that I'm using frames in different sizes. Remember, this section is not attached to the background yet because I need to add my mixed media. I now know how far out my embellishment cluster is going to extend, so I can go ahead and do that now. This particular stencil is super versatile. It has a bunch of different patterns that could be the edge of your layout or the edge of an embellishment cluster. There's a scallop one, there's some stripes. There's even one that looks like a notepad. I'm using my tried and true technique, a blending brush, and a really pale shade of pink. It adds a really subtle detail, but that's what I love about it. You are most definitely going to see more layouts featuring that stencil. It is a winner. With that all done, I can go ahead now and place these smaller frames. Here's frame number 5. Odd numbers are always great to work with. So I have 2 large frames, 2 small frames, and 1 in the middle, medium sized. I've run out of other options. I am forced now to go back to these embellishment clusters. The good news is though that I have a far more structured layout to work with. I'm going to let it guide my decisions and I'm going to make sure that anything that I add fits with the flow of what's already here. I'm also going to work with some of the florals that are already in clusters. So this collection had a couple of options with the florals. Some were individual flowers, which you then cluster together yourself, and others were already pre-done. And because of the struggles that I was having, I thought, you know what? Let's work with what the designer has already done for me. So combined florals it is. I went with a smaller one tucked behind the bottom right-hand corner of the photo and a larger one tucked behind the top right-hand side of the tag. The round element that I'm adding here is actually a layered embellishment cluster from the collection, and here's what really pulls everything together. Remember these from the very start of the video? It's like these embellishments were made for this collection. I'm going to use them to round out the clusters almost in a similar way that I would use enamel dots. All I need to do is peel away the backing and then add some liquid adhesive and position them in place. I'm doing the same thing that I did with the frames and making sure to use butterflies in several different sizes. They really are the perfect finishing touch. The acrylic pieces are just like crisp and clean, and they have this dimension about them that adds a beautiful quality to the page. They are my most favourite thing that Bramble Fox has, so be sure to check the description box below for a link to the store. As I finish up the layout, I want to share with you some close-up images so you can see the paper layers and the acrylic embellishments. I love the crisp, clean lines of those compared to the softness of the puffy stickers. With that done, the layout is complete, and so too is my challenge. If you think that just using up your stash will help you to have a more organized craft room, you'd be wrong. What you really need are systems to help you stay organized and clutter-free. Having less is part of the solution, but you are missing a big piece of the puzzle. It's simpler than you think, and I share everything you need to know in this video here. Be sure to watch it next, and I'll see you there.